taking a look at the Hagdama to Shabbos Ha'Aretz of Rav Kook. We read through on page number 1 the Rashi Prakim. We spoke about the pasuk Mika Amcha Yisrael Goy Echad Ba'aretz, and we quoted from the Zohar Kodesh, like Rav Kook says, Goy Echad Ba'aretz. When we're in the land of Israel, that's when we're a Goy Echad. When we are not in the land, we are not a Goy Echad. We noted that the Maharal expresses this idea when speaking about the mitzvah of tzedakah and specifically the prohibition of ribis, with an understanding the reason that a Jew gives to another Jew is because we are one gvir, and we pointed out that the lashon of goy, the lashon of what we colloquially refer to as nations of the world, really halachically exclusively means the Jewish people. We are the only goy echad ba'aretz. Yeah. So Rashi, by the way, has to kvetch in that pasuk. Rashi says Shnei Geim, two people of worthy of pride. That's what you say? Two rich people, right? Shnei Geim b'vitnech. So it's not one body, but two bodies that are going to emerge from this. That there isn't a unity, there is a division. That's the chiddush there. Is that it's not two individuals. It's not one individual; it's two individuals. But lahalacha, Chazal points us out that the lashon of goy means the Jewish people, as opposed to lahalacha, nations of the world are referred to as mishpachos. But we are referred to as a goy, says the Zohar Kadosh, dafka when we're in Eretz Yisrael, outside of Eretz Yisrael, or divorced from the land of Israel. The Jewish people do not have the same identity lahalacha as a goy echad, and that has a significant nafkamina with regards to when the obligation of Kol Yisrael Arevim Zelazeh kicks in. That only exists once we are nichnas la'aretz. That does not exist in the midbar. Right? The obligation for two Jews to look after each other, that our mitzvahs are wrapped up hand in hand, that I can say kiddush for you and it's not called a bracha levatala. So that is all dependent upon the mitzvah of Kol Yisrael Arevim Zelazeh. All of this we saw inside of the Maharal. We read very briefly last week as well the first 4 lines of Hagdama LeShabbos Ha'Aretz, which we're going to review now again, and then we're going to try to pull it apart. Rav Kook begins, Hashmita b'hayovel b'zmanim misyachasim zel hazeh k'may achama v'lavanim ba'olam k'may yisol v'ha'odem v'nefashos. Yachas ha'prah v'haklal. The relationship between Shemitah and Yovel in Zman, which is one domain of existence, is related to each other the same way that Chama and Levana, that sun and moon, are related to each other in space, and Yisrael v'ha'adam v'nefashos, and Klal Yisrael and ha'adam in the world of nefashos, people. We noted that the Sefer Yetzirah very famously explains, is probably the most famous idea from the Sefer Yetzirah, at least the one that's most quoted and to a certain extent most accessible, is that the whole world is divided up into Olam, Shana, and Nefesh. You can divide up the entirety of the Bria into space, different spaces, things that occupy space, times, and Nefashos. These 3 things are distinct domains. Distinct domains, they have relationships within them, but they are distinct from each other, and of course there are parallels from one to the next. As we noted last time, the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur inside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim is the Me'ula Shebekdusha in all 3 realms, right? The most Kodesh person in the most Kodesh time, in the most Kodesh place. So we have Olam, Shana, and Nefesh. Shemitah and Yovel has a relationship in Zman. Now, of course, we know the relationship between Shemitah and Yovel in the pshat of the Psukim. The Psukim tell us that after 7 Shemitah cycles comes Yovel. No. We'll take note of the fact, I'm not going to explain it in great detail now because there's a lot to explore, but we'll get there, that Shemitah and Yovel halacha are very tightly bound together. There's no such thing. Not midoraisa, midorabanan sort of, right? We have Shemitah midorabanan. There's no Yovel midorabanan. Maybe. So it's a machlokes, Rambam, Ravid. There's a lot to talk about, but we're not Noyeg Yovel at all today. We have minhagim that are akin to Yovel, according to one school of thought in the Gaonim. That's our minhag of blowing shofar at the end of Yom Kippur, is reminiscent to the Yovel. That's one school of thought. There's another whole school of thought that is different from that. But that notwithstanding, let's understand what the parallels are here. Because if we want to understand the relation between Shemitah and Yovel in Zman, so he says, yeah, it's kind of like the Chama and Levana ba'olam and Yisrael v'ha'adam b'nefashas. So now we need to know what those things are. Sun and moon. And he uses the word specifically Chama and Levana as opposed to the words Shemesh and Yarek, right? And he uses the words Yisrael v'ha'adam, and we'll speak about the specificity of those words as well. But Chama and Levana, let's understand this. So if you take a look inside of the packet here, to the page that says Shem Shmuel at the top. This is Shem Shmuel at the beginning of Sefer Vayikra. The Shem Shmuel, of course, is from Shmuel Borenstein. Last name is Borenstein. He's the Rebbe of Sachachav. Sachachav Rebbe. His father was the Avnei Nezer of Sachachav, and his grandfather, of course, was Katzka. Right? He was an anikel of the Katzka. Katzka was niftar when he was when the Shem Shmuel was a young boy. We have some of the recollections of the Shem Shmuel of his grandfather, the Katzka. He quotes him extensively throughout the statement, but most of that he got from his father, who was the son-in-law of the Katzka. There's a couple of good maisalas that we have of the Shem Shmuel hanging out with his Zaidi. The Katzka, when like all the Hasidim were petrified to go anywhere near the Katzka, Shem Shmuel was a young kid. He was an anikel, so he got to hang out with his Zaidi, and like the Hasidim were diving out of the windows and like fear, totally, like, yeah. So grandchildren, right? There's a certain charm. Even the Katzka would let his anikel come and hang out with him. Says the Shem Shmuel as follows. You'll see this. This is on page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So Shem Shmuel at the top. Says the Shem Shmuel. You see it on the right-hand column there. He says, "V'hinei k'shenivro hama'oros." When lights were created, the lights were created. This is well known to a certain extent. Hayushneim shavim, right? Sun and moon, they were equal. Equal. Shenamar shnei hama'aros hagdolim, the two great luminaries in the sky. Umachmas kitrug halavana nismata, and because the moon complained, it was shrunk. Now this is one of those midrashim that like you sit on for a good couple of decades before figuring out that like whatever you were told in kindergarten is for sure not true. Right? So, like there's definitely more to the story than the way that it was presented as like in kindergarten. It's like sun and the moon were like fighting over something. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu was like, well, you complained first, so we're going to punish you. That's definitely not what happened. It's for sure not what happened. What did happen? So there's a lot, but let's talk about it a little bit. Says Machmas Kitrug Halavan Nismata. Says the Shem Shmuel, "Ve'ein haperush shelule achet hayala or me'atzma sheloi Machmas Hashem." This is not to say that were it not for whatever went wrong, the sun and the moon would both shine independent of each other. That is not the case. It is not saying that the sun and the moon would both shine with the same brightness, independent of each other. The moon was, is, always will be a reflection of the sun. That is possible. Says the Shem Shmuel, what happened was not that the moon used to shine independently of the sun, and then it was nismait, and then it was shrunk. So now it doesn't shine independently. Says Shazeh lo yitachin. That's impossible. Why is that impossible? Says Hashem Yishmael, that is a reductio ad absurdum. It is impossible that could be the case. Why not? Shari kol seder habriya milamala mala ad mata hakol hu bechinas mashpia umekabel. Because every single thing in the bria, everything in the Bria, from top to bottom, from the highest heights to the lowest low, engages with everything around it, with a relationship of mashpia and mekabel. What does mashpia mean? Giver. That which is providing. Mekabel, receive. Mashpia and mekabel. In every relationship, or we'll be more specific, every instance and iteration of every moment of every relationship, someone is the mashpia, someone is the mekabel. Always. There's a story, Taka, once you mentioned Avnei Nezer, we'll point this out, that Avnei Nezer had a chavrusa. First day sitting with his chavrusa, nothing was matzlich. Nothing was being matzlich. They weren't able to do anything. And they realized that they were both trying to be mashpia. So they made up a system of alternating days that one would be mashpia and the other one would be mekabel, and then they'd switch. You have this in Good Chavrusa today. You have one person reads today, the next person reads tomorrow. Somebody's mashpia, somebody's mekabel. If two people are trying to be mashpia on each other simultaneously and neither of them are being mekabel, doesn't work. Doesn't work. You can't have such a relationship. Marriages work this way, parent-child relationships work this way. At different points in time, somebody's a mashpia and somebody's a mekabel. You have people in the world that are very good at being mashpia, that are very good givers and a terrible mekabel. Very bad at it. You have this in life when you have somebody that I think the way the kids say it today is you can dish it but you can't take it, right? Yeah, you can. There's somebody that can always notice. I'm happy to provide you with an insightful critique, right? But you try to give me an insightful critique. So God help you, right? So there's certain people that are very good at being mashpia, and then there's other people that are very good at being mekabel, very good at being mekabel. So much so that people don't want to be mashpia in their direction any longer because they're just mekabel all the time. They just want to take. Our relation with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this is beyond the scope of what we're talking about now. Our relation with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, sometimes, I'll just put this prat in for us to stew on for a bit. Sometimes our relation with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, most of the time, our relation with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mekabel. That's the vast majority of the time. But sometimes, our relation with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, at least the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to perceive our relation with Him, is to be mashpia, which is the world of brachos. Very good. So Rabbeinu Bachya, speaking about the world of brachos, that we in some way or another are mashpia on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, that is all within our perception of it. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the ultimate mashpia, and we are all mekablim to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But even in our relation with Hashem, to a certain extent, we need to view ourselves as givers to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You see this all the time in the nusach of tefillos. Lases nachas ruach leyotzer. You're going to give HaKadosh Baruch Hu nachas. You're going to give Hashem nachas. Now, HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't need your nachas, doesn't need my nachas. Right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is absolutely echad yachid miyuchad. He's absolute. Ani Hashem lo shinisi. All of that in Chayim, of course. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is absolute. But the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the Torah, He wants us to feel a partnership with Him. We're mashpia. 99.99999% of the time we're mekabel. It's why, by the way, I was speaking to a couple of chavra a little while ago. Today, learning is something that people enjoy a lot. Davening is something that people enjoy a lot less. Because in learning, there is the process of mashpia. And in davening, it's exclusively being mekabel. That's why we say in davening that the malachim are v'chulam mekablim zamizeh. It's only being mekabel. In davening, what we're doing is standing in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and saying, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're the big mashpia, and we are mekabel. That's it. That is it. It's hard for us. It's hard for us. It's hard for guys. Guys, our tchunas hanefesh is to be mashpia. It's hard. It's hard to be mashpia, meaning to be mashpia all day at work and at home and in learning and in the Beis Medrash, and then stand in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu like complete bittul, just the makabel. That's tough. There's a challenge in that. But nevertheless, says the Shem Yishmuel, the whole world operates mashpia and makabel. Says v'hadvarim yiduim levivinim shelo yitochen zulaseh. Those that know that the world could not exist without this great relationship of mashpia and makabel. If there wasn't the relationship of mashpia and makabel, nothing would work. So what does it mean that the moon was nisma'it? That the moon shrunk? Ela HaPerush, the explanation is, Yesh leime shahaya mehalcha begalgal gavaya asher lefi ma'alacha hayisat tamid noichach hashemesh. That the placement of the moon was, once upon a time, and I don't know how this works astronomically. Don't tell me about magnetism and tides, I don't know. Meaning, what he's saying is the Yesod here, that it used to be that the way that the moon operated was that it was always noichach l'shemesh. Noichach l'shemesh. It was always facing. It was always facing, which means it did not wax and wane. Says the Shem Yishmuel, pshat in the shrinking of the levana is not the shrinking of the levana as it used to be, it was its own mashpia, and now it's not mashpia. No. It used to be that the moon was a direct replica of the light of the sun. Whatever the sun gave it, it gave forth. It was always full moon. Always. And then, as a result of whatever happened, the miyut halavana, says the Shem Yishmuel, is that the moon is not always bimelu'ah. It is mekabel, it's mekabel, but it cannot then in turn be mashpia, that which it is mekabel. Meaning, it can receive, but it can't always give that which it receives. Now, this tragedy of the sun and the moon, and that breakdown of relationship, the inability of the sun, or the inability of the moon to be mekabel in full force and then mashpia in that same full force. Shem Yishmuel writes here, and Reb Tzadok speaks about this in a number of places as well. This is paradigmatic of the challenge that we all have in generational building, in families, in the Masorah of Talmud Torah, is that it's not always that which the Rebbe is makabel from his Rebbeim, that the Talmidim are makabel from the Rebbe. This is what I think in science technology they refer to as attenuation. The signal gets weaker. Now, it's not always the case. Sometimes you matzliach. Sometimes you have a full moon. Sometimes you can be mashpia, everything that you makabel. Not always. Not often, in fact. Most of the time, that which is received is not given over. There's a little bit. And Chazal are replete with sentiments of this nature. That no one is able to give fully that which they have received. This is a challenge. This is the miyut halavan. What are we saying, Shaila?
We're saying that the moon gives off light on its own. So why should that be a mashpia?
No, it does. The moon gives light, but it doesn't give its own light. It gives light that's reflected from the sun. It's only ever reflective of the sun. But that which it reflects from the sun at full moon is the whole thing, right? Is the full capacity of the moon to be mashpia, that which it was makabel. But most of the month, it's either waxing or waning. You don't get the full force of the moon. What do you say?
In fact, it's always a full moon. It's
correct.
Relationship with the earth.
Yeah, okay.
Of course. From our perspective, there is a miyut in the Levant. Now, we take note of this. We take note of this every month at Kiddush Levant, which many of us are going to say this month's Shabbos, except for the Zuz and Makdimim according to the Gra. Yeah.
If my Rebbe gives me over a Var Torah, and then So he's mashpia and I'm a couple. Then I give it over to somebody else.
Yeah.
Am I mashpia or am I makabel?
At that point, you're a mashpia. When you give it over, you're a mashpia.
So why should the moon is basically mashpia itself?
100%. It is mashpia and it's makabel. But that which it gives is not everything that it received. Right? Meaning the moon is not, from our perspective, is not a perfect mirror all the time. Right? The sun is a big ball in the sky and the moon is a big ball in the sky, but we don't get the light of the moon more than like a night and a bit every month.
According to this explanation, what was the moon complaining about?
It's a good challenge, not for now. You ask an excellent question. It's an excellent question. I'll very much very al regel achas.
Repeat the question.
The question was, sorry, I apologize. The question was, Chavra, with this understanding, what exactly was the complaint of the moon? What is the problem of the moon? So the complaint of the moon, Chavra, this is a problem that we'll just say like very, very, very passionate on our level. Sebederach mashal is that, say you have a Rebbe that wants to give you everything. He wants to give you kol tarakula that he was makabel from his Rebbeim, full force, the whole thing, the whole package. And then you want to give that over completely. There is something that gets in the way, which is, if I am simply a reflection of my Rebbeim, so then where's me? It's a massive knock to the ego for a person to view themselves as a mirror. I'm Mekabel, and then I'm Mashpia, so then where's me? The complaint of the Levana, just pashtus, b'derech musar for us on our level today, right now, is that there is a complaint that exists in the hearts and minds of every single human being, which is, if I give over everything that I receive, then I am not me. I'm just giving over. Then chaser is something in me, something's lacking in me. This is Mashal Amada V'Daimet, when one Rebbetzin gives another Rebbetzin a recipe for like her bubby's chocolate cake, but like leaves off an ingredient. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it should be that you have the chocolate cake, but not like the whole chocolate cake, because you should still come to me for the better chocolate cake.
Or else the second Rebbetzin adds a little sin.
So the masha, right? There's a little like tweaking, finagling with the zeh. That way people can understand that. So ego is the thing that gets in the way, which is how Chazal says that there was a kitrug. The moon says, if I'm just a makabel, then where's me? Where's me? Hear what he said.
Yeah, but that was the top kid of the moon.
Yes.
Over everything. So how can it complain about his top kid?
Yeah. Exactly. Meaning that's why we daven that at some point in time, and we say this Kiddush Levana every month. We say that at some point in time, the moon should be mibelua, that like it should be on the upswing and not go down.
That's a metaphor.
Of course it is. Oh, what this means astronomically, I don't know.
We're not saying we want it to be a full moon all the
No.
time. We're saying we want the fact that Yidden, the Klal Yisrael, waxes and wanes.
Yes.
We want to be someday a full moon all the time.
Correct, which means that we have the capacity to continue to build and to create and to be makabel from one generation to the next, right? Be makabel and then be mashpia without attenuation, without loss, without yiridas hadaris, right? That we shouldn't feel ourselves shrinking and attenuating and falling off the bandwagon. That we should feel that we're on the way up. That we're always on the way up. That which we are makabel, we can be mashpia. I mean, the finance chavra talk about this in terms of like the loss of generational wealth, right? Somebody, the Alta Zaidi worked very hard and built the whole zah, and then the Eniflach go and they squander it on, video games and app purchases and widgets from Amazon. I don't know, whatever it is, right? They squander it, because that which is received is not that which is then given over again. There is a lack, and that lack, Chazal pin it on a very simple level, very profound. Pin that on ego. Ego is the reason that people don't receive fully and don't give over that which they received fully. That's called ego. But there is a relationship in an ideal state of mashpia and mekabel. In an idealized state, there is mashpia, that which receives, that which gives, and that which is mekabel, that which gives. And now we have to talk about the third relationship that Rav Kook points out. We spoke about Shemitah and Yovel, which we haven't explained yet, of course, because that's the topic. But Chama and Levana. And then there is Yisrael v'ha'adam. Yisrael v'ha'adam. So Yisrael, we know what Yisrael means. Yisrael means us. What does ha'adam mean?
The rest of the people.
So Pashta says it means humanity. Now that word ha'adam, why does Rav Kook use the word ha'adam?
It's not usually used that way.
Right. Who uses it that way? The Gemara in Baba Kama. Gemara in Baba Kama, Daf Lamed Ches and Aleph. Take a look. You'll see the Taisus that says Ela ha'adam. Gemara in Baba Kama shows up in Baba Kama. This also shows up in Masechus Yevamos. With regards to the din of somebody that is Mekabel Tuma. So the din is that a Yisrael is Mekabel, Yisrael is Metame Ba'oil, Ve'enu Masa'olam Metame Ba'oil, that a Jew can create Tuma. A Jew that is Niftar, the Jewish body will create Tuma inside of an oil, but a non-Jew that's Niftar will not create Tuma in an oil. And the Gemara learns that from the Pasuk, Adam ki yomus ba'oil, a person that dies in an oil. And then the Gemara says something devastating. Atem kriim Adam, ve'ein umas ha'olam kriim Adam. You're called a person. Nations of the world are not called people. Now that sounds devastatingly racist. So this is a Taisus. Take a look. Taisus, Lamed Ches and Aleph, on the left-hand side, you'll see Ela ha'adam. So the Gemara in Baba Kama, we're not going to talk about the context of the Gemara necessarily because I just want to get to the Rabbeinu time here. The Gemara says Ela ha'adam. So Tema ha'ein oidei kachavim kriin Adam. Here the Gemara uses ha'adam to tell you about nations of the world. Says the Taisus, we have a kasha that ein umas ha'olam kriim Adam, nations of the world oidei kachavim at the very least are not called Adam. Kedetanya beperek mekabel, like the Gemara says in Bava Metzia. Omar Rabbi Shimon Yochai ein kivrei ha'ovdei kachavim metamin ba'oil, that the graves of idol worshippers are not metame ba'oil. Shenemar Adam ki yamas ba'oil, an Adam that dies ba'oil in a tent. Atem kriim Adam ve'in ha'ovdei kachavim kriim Adam. You're called Adam; they're not called Adam. Says Rashi, and then the Tosfos continues. Etc. Like 3 lines down from that, V'Rabbeinu Tam Mefarish. Zakt Rabbeinu Tam, says Rabbeinu Tam, the yesh chiluk bein Adam leha-Adam. Adam means Jews. Ha-Adam means humanity. Adam means Jews. Ha-Adam means humanity. Now, why? Why is that the case? That's Adkan Rabbeinu Tam. The word Adam means Jews. Ha-Adam means all people. Ha-Adam. Now, turn over the page to the Chasam Sofer. Chasam Sofer points out, see, like the third paragraph there in the square brackets, Taisus Dibra Maskal Ein Ha'ovdei Kachavim Kriin Adam, V'Rabbeinu Tam Mefarish, the yesh chiluk bein Adam leha-Adam, the Ovdei Kachavim Bichlal Ha-Adam Ninhu. Idol worshippers are called Ha-Adam. What is Ha-Adam? It says V'Yizbir Ataris Chaim, he quotes from the Sefer Ataris Chaim, Ki Ha-Adam Behei HaYidiyah, that when the pasuk refers to Ha-Adam with the definite article, with a Hei HaYidiyah, Dekai haguf ha'imid b'faneinu. That means ha'adam, the definable adam, that thing which can be defined. Ha'adam. If you want to talk about Ha'adam, we're talking about an object. The thing called a person.
Thing called human.
Right. Or a person or the collection of people. So he says, Uvazeh bein Oded Chama Mazalas bein Yisrael Tsurus Adam Hu. There is the form, the physical format, arms, legs, eyes, nose, mouth. That's called Ha'adam. Ach Adam b'lai hayidiyah, but the concept of Adam, without the definite article, without referring to a specific Adam, the Adam, that notion, b'lai hayidiyah, kai al toichay Adam pnimi, chelek eloki mima. Zeh kai al Yisrael v'lai ha'odek chava mazaks. The notion of Adam is not talking about a specific person or a specific people. The notion Ha-Adam, talking about a definite article, me, Blumenthal, arms, legs, eyes, nose, mouth. Adam is talking about the ideal person. The person as HaKadosh Baruch Hu intended and created. That's called Adam. Now, the Toldos Yaakov Yosef, who's the Toldos Yaakov Yosef? Mipolania, right? He was one of the first generation Talmidim of the Baal Shem Tov. So the Toldos Yaakov Yosef points out that this relationship between Adam and Ha-Adam, as the Chasam Sofer explained it, he gives language that those who are familiar with the Maharal will be intensely familiar with. He explains this on the facing page here. You see this in the third paragraph in Nirali, Ki Adam Nivra min Chaimer v'Tzura. That a person is created from Chaimer and Tzura. What does Chaimer mean? Raw materials. Tzura? Form. Right? We'll talk about what those mean in a moment. He says, V'hem shnei havachim, these two things are opposites of each other, very often fighting with each other. This concept of Chomer and Tzura, those that are familiar with the Maharal speaks about this like everywhere. The concept of Chomer and Tzura. This, if you want an excellent explanation of this, really fleshed out beautifully, the Shiurei Das of Rav Yosef Yehuda Bloch, the second Rosh Yeshiva of Tels, has in his Shiurei Das has like 3 or 4 shiurim on Chomer and Tzura in the derech of the Maharal. Very simply stated, I mean, this originates in like Platonic philosophy, is that there is such a thing called a table, and then there is such a thing called the concept of a table. Right? We've explained this once or twice before when we were learning Einaya. That's I have to give credit to Dr. Bremen, my Rebbe in computer science. When I was in YU, we learned object-oriented programming. So you have an object, and then you have an instance of that object. So a table is an object. Where is it? It is. It's a philosophy. It's a thing. And then you create an instance of it that says, the Toldos Yaakov Yosef, this is the Chasam Sofer, this is Rabbeinu Tam, is that there is a thing called Adam. Kadosh Baruch Hu creates this idea called Adam. Each person is Ha-Adam. Now a Jew who is living in accordance with that Adam that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created is Adam. That's the category of Adam. We are representatives of the category. Of the Kuchavim Mazalos, those that have abandoned that idea that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to create in the world, those are called Ha-Adam. They are an instance of it, but without the philosophy of it.
What about the Noah?
It's a good shot. So, meaning, assuming that they're not Ovdei Kuchavim Mazalos, is what to talk about. They're still mitame. I mean, the halacha. They're still not. Yeah, they're still not mitame about it.
They have a nefesh, not a neshama.
Without getting into the Pirkei Pratim, that just to understand the language that Rav Kook is using here now becomes very specific, because the relationship between I've seen different things in the translation of Rav Kook, and we'll end with this in a moment. There's a couple of different translations of the Hakdama to Shabbos Ha'Aretz. Some translate Yisrael v'ha'adam, talking about Yisrael, the Jewish people, v'ha'adam, and the individual, and Yisrael v'ha'adam as Yisrael and humanity. And the emes is that both are correct. Yisrael, the notion of what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants a human being to be, is supposed to be mashpia on each instance of a human being. There is a relationship between mashpia and mekabel, meaning, we'll talk about it in language that we're a little bit more familiar with, that the neshama is supposed to be mashpia on the guf. The guf is ha'adam, the neshama is adam. And that is true on a personal level. That's also true on a national level and on a universal level, that the job of the Jewish people is to be the neshama of the world. Is we're supposed to be the adam plugged into ha'adam. That's our job.
The conscience of the nations, is that what you're doing?
What you saying?
The conscience of the nations?
I mean, to a certain extent, yes, but also physically so. We're not supposed to only be like an ephemeral theoretical construct. We're also supposed to be physically present as a mashpia to the rest of the world. Now, this, of course, I'll just say this out because we're about to run a minute late, is this, and I make my Talmidim learn this about Peh every single year whenever we learn other Sefer Shmos, Sefer Bamidbar. So this is how the Sforno explains the mission statement of the Jewish people. V'atem tiyu lemamlechas kohanim v'goy kodesh. Because Baruch Hu says this to Klal Yisrael just before we get to Torah. We're supposed to be a Melechas Kohanim, a kingdom of Kohanim, v'goy Kodesh. Says the Sforno, lehavinu leharos lechol hamin ha'enoshi lekroi kulam b'shem Hashem u'lehavdai shchem echad. The goal of the Jewish people is to be a mashpia to the rest of humanity, to bring the rest of the world back to our notion of monotheism. That's what we're supposed to be doing. We are supposed to be mashpia on the world. Now, once we've established that the relationship between Chama and Levan in the world is mashpia and mekabel, and it's supposed to work out. And it didn't work out because of all the issues as described. And Yisrael v'ha'adam on the level of Prat and Klal are supposed to be mashpia and mekabel. So now we understand a little bit of the yachas of Prat and Klal, which we are going to Hashem Yisbarach take a look at next week. And then we'll begin to understand what Shemitah and Yovel tie into with this. And with that, I wish you a wonderful day. Thanks for being here.